Welcome to a new edition of the Neon Jazz interview series with veteran jazz pianist Kevin Hayes on the 2021 CD, All Things Are, featuring Ben Street and the great Billy Hart. This album was recorded in December 2020 after months of a COVID lockdown on the legendary Billy Hart's 80th birthday. It's a triumphant recording and a moment for this collective. We catch up with the veteran, versatile, and talented Kevin Hayes to talk about this, the pandemic, and the future as the revival continues. Enjoy.
Thanks for taking a minute out for the show. I appreciate it. I guess the theme of our lives probably over this last year and a half, along with the weather up in the Northeast, is just the whole COVID thing. This album sounds like a very triumphant moment of celebrating an 80th birthday, getting out of quarantine. Must be a jubilant album for you to put out.
I'm really happy about how it came out, and it's been really nice to hear the response.
So I guess first and foremost, going into it, there was a lot of original compositions. There was a lot of compositions that you penned. Talk to me a little bit about the artistic construction of the material that went into this performance.
Well, honestly, we didn't have really a chance to rehearse, and though we've all played together over the years, as separately, we've never played as a trio together. So I thought, I have several songs that are what we call contrafacts, which are, songs based on other songs, which is basically, Charlie Parker did a lot, and I took even one of Charlie Parker's, and so I guess double contrafacted his Grapple from the Apple. So the idea was to take forms that were familiar and not to go too crazy with a bunch of writing, and I wasn't doing a whole lot anyway. Although I did have some things that I was writing during the pandemic and lockdown and all that, but and there were a couple of originals that did not have a basis in a standard or something like that we did do, but they weren't crazy forms or things like that. So I knew that Billy, in particular, who had not played this kind of trio music with me, would not really have a problem. We could just kind of get to the creative part in terms of what we were going to play on these things.
So it was Billy's 80th birthday. What was that like to celebrate, an icon's birthday by recording something?
Yeah. That was wonderful. We were so happy everyone was so happy to see each other. We hadn't seen each other or played in such a long time. Yeah, I mean, Billy's a legend, and I first met him when I was 18 years old, and I was on my first tour. We weren't playing in the same band, but I met him in a club in Madrid back in, 1986, I guess it was. I just graduated high school and got asked to go with a band from New York to Spain to do some playing. So I met him in a club. I was introduced to him, and in classic Billy Hart fashion, just turns to me and says, "I'm curious about you. Do you want to play?" And they had already finished their gig. But Ron McClure was there, the bass player, and he said, "Ron, get your bass out. We're going to play with this guy." This pimply faced kid from Connecticut, and here's, just this incredible drummer just point blank asking me if I want to play. So, I mean, that was quite an experience. So that was my introduction to Billy. So, over these years, I've had such appreciation and love for him, and, of course, his playing. And, we've been on different bands together. He played on one of my early Blue Note records in the 90s, played with Eddie Henderson over the years and some different configurations. So it was a treat and just a great way to celebrate his birthday.
This was done in December. Obviously we had some time to kind of, soak in what the world was going through. When all of this started in March, what was this like for you? What was the transition of seeing your itinerary go away in hours and everything that was gonna come your way?
Well, truthfully, my spring was looking a little slim to begin with, so it just got even slimmer. But as it turns out, we were scheduled to do 4 nights, and we a trio at Smoke, not with this band, but with I played with Ron Carter and Al Foster. We did 3 nights, I think leading up to like March 14th or 15th, just as the city was starting to close down. Clubs were still open, the Vanguard, someone was, playing there that week, I think maybe Peter Bernstein. Ron made 3 nights. We had such a great time playing with Ron and Al. And then Ron bowed out for the last night, just feeling like, okay, this is writing's on the wall, and I'm gonna, go home. And we played one more night with Al, with another bass player who filled in, Orlando LaFleming, and that was it. And that was, the last gig of, as far as I can recall, the year. I don't think there was anything in there. Maybe I did one little outdoor thing while the weather was still good locally, where I was living up in Ulster County, New York. That was it. And as difficult as it was, in terms of work and figuring out, okay, how am I going to pay the bills and all that kind of thing, and of course the devastation of the pandemic. Personally, it provided me with some reflective time and to kind of get what I call kind of life stuff together that is difficult for me to do. Just like I moved in the interim and I bought a little piece of land in New York State and planning to build, and just things that it's hard to get to when you're running around a lot. I really appreciated the pause, though, of course, I would have preferred it to be under different circumstances, but sometimes you need a smack upside the head, to pause. And, anyway, but my experience of it was, kind of a lot of self time for reflection and, getting outside and exercising and some things in the routine department that are frankly challenging for me when I'm traveling so much.
I guess that's the one thing that's probably been the most evident about all of this is that Mother Nature will ultimately win, and we aren't really in control as much as we think we are. And I think that's the thing that's interesting about a lot of people in the world of music that actually had this kind of self-imposed exile, so to speak, because there was nothing else to do and there was a minute to kind of exhale. So I hear a lot of the silver linings that are going through it. So my question to you is this: how do you see the world of jazz emerging stronger, or how do you see yourself emerging to the stage in this next chapter of music revival stronger?
I think for me, it's the word connection comes up naturally for me. It's very easy to get caught up in one's head about music and theoretical about music, and I've always tried to have the feeling be tantamount, the most important thing, not negating what the wonders of the mind, what it can do in clever configurations of songs and improvisation and things like that, but to connect, it's almost like a bodily thing with, and of course, rhythm is such a huge aspect of this music, in particular jazz. And my hope is that when I start playing again, and I will be playing some this summer in Europe, to just deepen that connection, or to take what I've gleaned, I guess, from my experience of the kind of isolation and being on the ground, and being grounded in this sense is not a bad thing, in my experience. We are born from the ground. We will return to the ground. Doesn't mean that we can't be have our stuff together if we are flying around in airplanes or whatever it's going to be going forward, spaceships, but this is home, and so just, I think a lot of that, and of course connecting with others, and with ourselves and with others. So I hope that, and the healing capacity of music, I think if it's coming from those roots, that's what I hope to return. Well, I shouldn't even say return, but going forward with,
Absolutely. And I think the one other part of this that's interesting is when you did this session, Paul and Molly, they were really fighting like a lot of club owners like Spike and a lot of people to stay open and stay vital. This had to be another level of that where, what you did was another level of triumphantly keeping these clubs that are iconic open in the country.
Well, I appreciate that. I mean, I was grateful that Paul, asked to do something, and that it worked out the way it did. I mean, as maybe you're aware, we didn't plan on this being an album, but Paul does such a good job recording these live streams, and I get back and I'm like, wow, this is really good. You know, I mean, I was just sort of, you know, I mean, it wasn't any old gig because it was an empty club and a live stream, which is not as familiar, right? But, you know, in a sense, it was okay, I'm going to play, and that's it. But because the recording, we all thought that it sounded quite good, that we said, okay, we should release this, and that's what we did.
You're going to have some shows in Europe. Things are going to pick back up. And I want to know from you, collectively, what do you hope both the musician and the audience realizes about this long absence away from live music, the importance of the live music element?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I mean, it's easy to take these things for granted, right? We take everything for granted. Life, our health, music. Yeah, I guess if there's a hope around it, that I will not take it for granted, and to feel that appreciation every moment that I'm able to play and share what, you know, some musical thoughts, feelings. And I hope, and I don't think it needs my hope, that people will appreciate it with, you know, having not had access to it. As they say, you know, you don't know what you have till it's gone, kind of a thing. I'm assuming that will be the case, that there will be that, and probably it's already happening, I'm sure. I mean, you know, there's already concerts happening around the world, different, depending on where you are, but Europe has been open, not open, but has been returning to concerts for a few months.
What did you personally learn about yourself over this time that maybe you didn't know about yourself before, that's going to make you stronger when you return to the stage?
I don't know if I have a real good answer for that. Similar to what we were just talking about in terms of not taking things for granted, and yeah, just the life is finite, one's life as a human being, and to appreciate, you know, like time flies. I mean, I'm 53 years old now, and like, how did that happen? You know, I was just reflecting, oh, that's a short 7 years, I'll be 60. And I'm like, what? Using my energy wisely as I can, and to share what it is that, you know, whatever gifts that I've been given and then have worked to develop, to bring healing and to bring unifying, for lack of a better word, energy to a very fractured world, that there can be coming together, that I can be have something to do with that, you know, of leaving the world a better place, kind of a thing, or rather, you know, returning it to that, in spite of what our dear race tends to do, if left to its own lower drives. I mean, here we are in this big experiment. Yeah, that's my hope, that I can bring some of these things that I hopefully have picked up and will hopefully retain, because I think the mistake would be this idea of returning to normal. I don't agree with that phrase. I don't think the normal was particularly good. I'm talking about the way that we were hurtling forward as a technologically advanced, yet not really seeing the costs, both personally and to the environment and just in our own minds. I mean, so much has happened in the last 100 years that, this is just like a blink, and yet the curve has gone like crazy, right? What we are capable of, and yet we have all this DNA in us that's been programmed for millennia, to operate on another operating system, and to lose that connection, to lose that trust of where we actually come from and what we are, doesn't mean we can't evolve, but this the altar of technology alone, right, that somehow it is going to replace nature, and we won't need it, and we can go to Mars if we wreck this place. Is a little ridiculous, and to me it speaks to this idea of what do you have in front of you already that we are wasting, right, or wasting away, and what needs our participation and for our very survival before we start, exploring options for, moving.
Right.
You know what I mean?
It's a natural progression of the conversation is that I've really felt, and I've heard from a lot of people, a lot of musicians, that a lot of these things, whether it's race or class war or any of these things, were already a car hanging off the edge of the cliff. And this gave us all that moment, that mirror moment to say, what's going on? And is it going to go over the edge, or is it going to, going to be okay? And for humanity, especially Americans, like, it wasn't enough to have a pandemic. We had to add all these other things into it, but they needed to be addressed.
We had, and I, things come to a head, and history may be interesting to see the convergence of these things in whatever historical context. But not being a historian, I just think that we can just make use of what we have here and the opportunities and the discussions that we're having. Obviously the Black Lives Matter movement, George Floyd. I mean, these were global, had global ripples, and just obviously so important and so overdue. And
without a doubt. Well, hey, Kevin, man, thank you for opening up about the album, about the worldwide music, what's been going on lately. I really appreciate it.
Sure. My pleasure. Thank you.
Thanks for listening and tuning in to another Neon Jazz interview, where we give you a bit of insight into the finest cats in New York, Kansas City, and spots all over the world, giving fans all that jazz. Thanks to Kevin for his time, music, and story. If you want to hear more interviews, go to Famous Interviews with Joe Domino in the iTunes Store. Visit Neon Jazz at youtube.com, and for everything Neon Jazz all the time, go to theneonjazz.blogspot.com. Until next time, enjoy the jazz, my friends.
Neon Jazz.